We're gonna save the stat comparisons for later in the video, since whenever you put someone up against Itachi in a 1v1 versus battle, the giant elephant in the room is what their resistance to genjutsu is. Because Itachi obviously has a lot of them, and even the ones that don't immediately unalive you, incapacitate you so he can finish the job himself. That being said, Minato's resistance to genjutsu is questionable at best. While it is true that we've never seen Minato outright resist a genjutsu, a ton of people, myself included, have made the argument in the past that Minato might have some sort of genjutsu resistance, since he didn't seem all too scared of looking Obito in the eye when he fought against him, even after acknowledging the fact that he was an Uchiha, and not only that, but a Sharingan genjutsu user. This could serve as proof that Minato has resistance to genjutsu, but it could also serve as evidence that he's not all too savvy to fighting against an ocular genjutsu user, as staring one directly in the eye is normally a death sentence. But it sort of got me thinking why this happened. Not only why Minato looked Obito directly in his eye, but why Obito didn't cast a genjutsu on Minato. And I think it's possible that Obito couldn't cast a genjutsu on Minato because of his control of the Nine Tails. It is stated by Chiyo that when you're going up against a Sharingan, if you're doing it one-on-one, you should probably run away, but if you're doing it against two people, try and take the Sharingan user from his back. This to me implies that normally a Sharingan user isn't going to be able to put two people under a genjutsu, and this tracks throughout the series for the most part. Have we ever seen a Sharingan user put two people under a genjutsu? The answer to that question is simply yes, but it's not the same way as Itachi's genjutsu. Itachi's genjutsu, specifically ephemeral, aims to control you for a period of time, while Kakashi, the person who has genjutsu two people at once, simply knocks both of them out with it rather than keeping them under permanent control. Obito also used a similar genjutsu on both of Danzo's Hokage guards, keeping them in a daze after they'd been taken into the Kamui dimension. It's unknown what genjutsu Obito or Kakashi used on these opponents, and regardless, it's not one that Itachi uses in character or ones that I can reliably say that he has. So it's possible Minato knew about this Sharingan weakness, and that's why he didn't care to look Obito in the eye during their fight. However, that is just an assumption on my part, but I think it's far more likely than Minato just being dumb and basically asking to get genjutsu'd by a Sharingan user, staring them directly in the eye. Nonetheless, that's obviously not an option for Minato in his fight against Itachi, and the only other way I could realistically see Minato getting around Itachi's genjutsu is using shadow clones to increase his number, to turn the fight from a one-on-one in a sense. This works for a few reasons. One being it's shown in the fight with Kakashi that Itachi's genjutsu does not work on shadow clones of people, and two, if the genjutsu Itachi uses happens to be Tsukuyomi, then he'll drain a good deal of his stamina if it fails and he hits a clone with it. However, the same rule of running away from a Sharingan user doesn't directly apply in all ways to Itachi, since when Naruto ran into him in the forest, he mentions that since Itachi can cast genjutsu from his hands, it's almost like fighting two people at once, and it's shown pretty clearly in the fight that Naruto never even looks at Itachi's eyes, yet was still placed under genjutsu. So it's likely that Itachi doesn't even have to point his finger directly at you in order to initiate the jutsu. Or maybe it just happened off screen, I don't really know. This puts it up to a matter of how many clones Minato summons when he fights Itachi, and if he does it off rip, knowing he's fighting a Sharingan user. Minato does only make one clone in the war arc while he's using KCM, even though realistically with the help of the Nine Tails, he should be able to make far more than that. This leads me to believe he was just using the amount of clones he would normally use and not relying on Kurama's chakra to aid him in making them. Minato does also have access to giant summoning animals, so even if he does make only one clone, he could summon one of them as well to help out in the fight, and with Itachi's eyesight being as bad as it already is, I think saying he could hit Minato with a genjutsu when he's all the way at the top of Gamabunta is a really big stretch. I do think it's possible he could hit Bunta with an Amaterasu, but I'll get into Amaterasu a bit later in the video. So Minato certainly has ways around Itachi's genjutsu, but Itachi's genjutsu is pretty dangerous if it lands, and it could possibly mean the end of the fight. As far as how they compare physically, it's stated in the last chapter of part 1, that Minato has unrivaled strength and that everyone sets off in hopes of reaching his level one day. This is a weekly statement from the original manga, so its credibility would normally be questionable at best, but I think this sentiment is echoed through the manga and a few characters in the story and other guidebooks. For one, Jiraiya says that everyone pales in comparison next to Minato, and that his capacity as a shinobi was unmatched, with him having extremely high talent for ninjutsu as well. Also, even then, Itachi might have gotten stronger since the beginning of part 2, because we don't know when he actually acquired the Susanoo. For all we know, he could have had it back in part 1. He certainly met the parameters for it, which is having both of your Mangekyo abilities unlocked, and we see both Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi in part 1. Even then, though, it's unknown whether or not he had the Tosuka Blade and Yada Mirror back then, since Zetsu and Orochimaru kind of make it sound like these are spirit weapons you can find and acquire, rather than just being a part of Itachi's Susanoo. With that being the case, there is still another statement in part 2 that echoes Minato's spot at the top, being Kakashi saying that Naruto is the only one who can surpass the Hokage, and that he truly believed that. This is also repeated back to us in Data Book 3, so it's pretty clear cut that Minato is at the top when it comes to the shinobi around this era. Data Book 3 does take place after Itachi's passing, but the statement I'm talking about comes from before that and captures a moment before that as well, being when Naruto is training for his Rasen Shuriken. The Raikage also comments something similar to what these other statements say, claiming that he had exchanged blows with Minato many times, that he was a great man, and that a finer shinobi had never lived. I know it's a bit weird when it comes to these statements about people being a quote-unquote better shinobi than another person, especially with Hashirama claiming Itachi was a better shinobi than him, despite never meeting the guy in his entire life. But I think it's probable the Raikage is talking about Minato's capabilities here, as not only does he mention no one is faster than him since Minato passed away, but he also after that says that even with all of Minato's power, he's still not around to help out with today's problems because he underestimated the power of the Tailed Beast. That last part isn't true, but the Raikage doesn't know that someone actually controlled the Nine Tails all that time ago. He thinks Minato went out in a fight against the Nine Tails, but regardless, the point still stands. I'd also like to comment that even among the people Minato is stronger than, Itachi is stronger as well. Not stronger than Minato, or at least that's not what I'm saying, but when you compare Itachi to the highest tiers of character at the time the statement is made, that being the signing, it's pretty clear Itachi is much stronger than them. Orochimaru mentions that Itachi is way stronger than him, and that should reliably make Itachi stronger than Jiraiya as well, since Orochimaru and Jiraiya are on par with each other. Another sentiment echoed throughout the guidebooks and the manga itself. Itachi's run-in with Jiraiya has always been a huge point of contention, since Itachi seems to remark that he can't just take Jiraiya out, but keep in mind that Itachi had already used Tsukuyomi that day, and it's a jutsu that stated to take a lot out of him. Not only that, but by the time he would have fought Jiraiya, he had already used it twice, so it's probable he's not exactly in the right condition to take on a Sannin level opponent. He even had to escape using Amaterasu, something that fatigued him so much it actually made him turn off his Sharingan, something Itachi almost never does throughout the entire series. Speaking of Itachi's stamina, that's another issue I want to touch on, since while you can argue Itachi's stamina is bad, he has pretty insane endurance, and his stamina is only bad under specific contexts. For example, his fight with Sasuke, despite all the jutsu he threw and used, he outlasted Sasuke in stamina for that fight, and we know Sasuke's stamina and recovery speed was boosted by him having Orochimaru in that fight, or at least most of that fight. We do know as well, Minato isn't a person looking for a long drawn out fight. He normally tries to wrap things up pretty quickly. He tries to end the fight with Obito very quick. When he sees Obito on top of the Ten Tails, he quickly goes to cut his chest open. He sets up all the kunai for the Four Crimson Ray barrier long before the other Hokage show up. He tries to wrap up the fight with B quickly, and when Minato shows up to help out another platoon of the Third War, one of the Leaf Shinobi soldiers specifically says, "We finally get to see the Yellow Flash in action, but don't blink or you'll miss it." So Minato is pretty famous for cleaning up battles quickly, and a part of that strategy is throwing kunai around the battlefield, another consistently in-character tactic for Minato. He does it against the Raikage, he brings Obito to a field of kunai he had previously thrown before, and even when we see a depiction of him using a Rasengan in chapter 519, he's standing in a field of kunai. It's very, very in character for Minato to do this, But a possible counter Itachi could use is simply spreading Amaterasu around the battlefield they're fighting on. This happens in his fight against Sasuke, but it might not be the best counter for a couple of reasons. For one, Itachi doesn't have Kagetsuchi, so him controlling the flames and spreading them isn't likely. It's way more likely that they spread on their own, and of all things it could spread to, it spread on trees and just sat there, which you could argue makes no real sense. Why are the flames of Amaterasu sitting on top of trees? I think it's because the Amaterasu only burns what it's targeted at. That's how Zetsu describes the ability, and it would easily explain why Amaterasu can burn literal fire but not burn trees of all things. Because if you remember the Amaterasu shots, and there were 4 in total, they were targeted at Sasuke, but Itachi missed the first 3 and hit Sasuke with the last one. So if Minato and Itachi are fighting in a flammable area, I guess you could say that the fire would spread around if it didn't hit Minato, but if Itachi purposely targeted the trees, the Amaterasu would burn out since it only extinguishes after it's burned its target. The other big problem that comes with doing this is Itachi fatiguing himself to a heavy degree. Since using the Mangekyo is extremely taxing for him in part 1, he can only use 2 Tsukuyomi and 1 Amaterasu before having to rest for a few days. And in part 2, he uses 5 Amaterasu shots and his right eye is blinded. And obviously being fatigued is not a good thing when it comes to being in a fight with someone as fast as Minato. This is a fight where if Minato happens to tag you once, you're going to have an FTG seal placed on you, and that he can teleport to you wherever he wants and hit you with a mark that essentially means the end of the fight for anyone, and that includes Itachi here in this fight. Minato does this to Obito, he does it to B, he does it to the Stone Ninja he fights in Kakashi Gaiden. It's something very in character for him that he commonly uses sneak attacks, or in order to attack you from behind, something that should catch Itachi off guard since he doesn't have the Byakugan or anything. Itachi has been shown to attack people behind him before. He did it to Naruto's clones when he ran into him in the forest, but that's hardly the same as someone teleporting directly behind you, and when Minato does this, he can attack you as he teleports. We saw this happen when he stabbed Obito after teleporting to him when he hit him with the Rasengan. It is worth pointing out that when Minato fought B was able to see through his attempt to teleport behind him and set up his sword for a mutual strike. But I think it's equally worth pointing out that Minato didn't try his best here and only held B at knife point rather than teleporting to him with an attack like he's been shown to do. It's possible that maybe he hadn't put that tactic into play yet in his Jonin years, as he also doesn't do that with the Stone Shinobi and Kakashi Gaiden, but I'm talking about Hokage Minato anyway, so that doesn't really matter to me. At this point, Wincons are really the only thing left to discuss on Itachi's side. You have Amaterasu, which should be able to burn Minato if it lands, and his Genjutsu that Minato only has counters for and no real resistance to. Minato has Sealing Jutsu on his side to help get rid of Itachi, but I think it's more likely he tried to get Itachi the same way he did Obito, the Raikage, and the Stone Ninja, which is by finding some time to hit them from a blind spot. This becomes increasingly more easy if Minato happens to lay a hand on Itachi, since he can just teleport to him whenever he wants, which sort of takes one of Itachi's main Wincons out of the discussion, that being the Susanoo. Itachi really only used the Susanoo as a late game option while he's alive, more than likely due to stamina restraints, but if he does summon it early in the fight for some omnidirectional protection against Minato, Minato is going to have to try and wait it out, dodging attacks, since he has no reliable way to bypass the Susanoo, and on top of that, the Yada Mirror. The Susanoo's relevance in this fight is entirely dependent on if Minato has already touched Itachi, or if Itachi pulls it out earlier in the fight than he usually does. I think the Amaterasu Wincon could become more likely if Itachi could accurately guess which kunai Minato would teleport to and light that one on fire. If he's unsuccessful in his guessing attempt, then obviously he'd just drain his stamina and his own eyesight, making Minato all the more likely to win. That's really the thing with this versus battle. For the most part, there are a lot of factors that could change the course of this fight in Itachi's favor, but a lot of them require you to be pretty generous to Itachi, like him accurately guessing which kunai Minato will teleport to, him using his Susanoo early, and the most reliable win con is definitely Genjutsu, which, like I said, Minato only has counters for but no resistance to it if he does get hit. If it's Tsukuyomi, Minato is cooked, but if it's another Genjutsu and Minato has already summoned a clone or frog to help him, they could potentially snap him out of the Genjutsu. But again, there are a lot of things undetermined in this fight. If you want to know who I think will win more consistently, I'd say Minato, since his win con is far more likely, quite literally just being touch Itachi, and Itachi's win cons rely on extreme generosity, extremely generous situations, some of which rely on gambling, so I say Minato takes it.